Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the Practical Microservices stream. Changing some things up with the tunes today. Got my Spotify 2022 year in review, and I always open the stream off with the same song, and that is completely messing up all of the data, and can't have that. We need clean data, which is really hard to get. So anyway, yeah, I am really excited for today's stream because yesterday the conclusion got me so jazzed up, getting the Rails app to share the schema with the aggregator. And so today we get to begin really in earnest integrating Rails and Eventide, I hope. So the thing is, we've got to the current video tutorials application. Let me switch over to the screen here. Is it even open here? Yeah, sorry, this is the call this book code down there. Yeah, so let me actually fix what we're doing. We are porting the application layer to Rails. Wow, there's so much enthusiasm in my voice today. I am still feeling sick from whatever it was I caught that kept me out on Monday and the tail end of the Thanksgiving break. Anyway, so it was like, I want to say 2 months ago, where we got to a point and it was like, hey, should we do aggregation or should we start porting the application layer to Rails? And someone in the chat suggested doing aggregation, which I think was a fine idea. And so we did that. And I think we got that to a good place. Although we were going to check to make sure, I better write that down, otherwise I'm going to forget here. We're going to check to make sure that the aggregator is actually complete. So let's see here. What are our to-dos today? We want to make sure user credentials aggregator is done. Even if it's done, we may make some changes to it in the future, because one thing that I keep thinking of is we have this wonderful control pattern that we've done in the components, and that's been really good for getting examples of things. And the whole reason we want to share the schema with the Rails app for development is that in Rails orthodoxy, your tests are reading directly from a database. I say the word orthodoxy, which sometimes has a pejorative sense to it. I don't mean it in that way. It's just the standard practices when using Rails suggest that you actually touch the database when you're doing your tests. Oh, hey, SB Ditto. How's it going? Good to see you there. Sorry, I just gotta type something. Oh yeah, it was chilly out today. One second, just typing a message to a friend here. Okay, type the message. Sorry, one more to type. Good spelling there. Anyway, sorry, I'm back. Anyway, yeah, cold. I live in Utah. It's cold here as well. And not just like mildly cold. The past couple of nights, it just felt like that familiar bone-chilling, freeze your soul that I experienced growing up in Wisconsin. So, you know, that just is a slice of home to me. I know not everybody likes that, but I do. When outside is as bleak as inside my heart is. No, just kidding. Anyway, what was I gonna say? Right, so the aggregator, we want to make sure it is complete. And then, right, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there. We might still add to it because in Rails practice, you actually touch the database in your tests. And so rather than make it the responsibility of the Rails app to come up with examples to put into said database, maybe that's something that the aggregator does. So we could put controls in there, what the rows that are supposed to be present look like. So we may come back and do that as we continue with the development of this Rails application. Sorry. All right, I'm back again. So let's go to the aggregator real quick. What is the status over here? Okay, we removed the comments, we fixed the pathing issues, we modified the create table query so that the constraint is just built as part of the table. And then we had to add a few different require statements to the schema client to make sure that all of its dependencies would load. So that looks good. Let's run the tests that we have. They're working. I think this was all running before, so I'm just going to go ahead and check this in. So schema client. There we go. All right. So that was easy. Let's do that. Okay, so now the question is, what piece of this are we going to convert over first? So to that end, I am going to run... Oh, I'm in the aggregator one. I'm going to run the application docker compose rm-sf and docker compose up. One of the... Oh, something's already running. Message DB. Is it right here? It is. So let's... Oh, this is the Rails app one. So you... What are you running? I think my idea was to... We're transitioning things over to Rails. So let's right now say that the Rails app has control of the database as much as we can, given that all of our schema lives in the JavaScript code right now, except for the user credentials aggregator. So there's going to be a fun little bit of who owns what. And I'm wondering if I'm missing an opportunity here to really talk through, suppose we were actually doing a migration. Well, that's the thing. So we are migrating an actual services-based system. We are not refactoring from a legacy application. So the things will be a lot easier to move over because they're not intertwined with one another to begin with, which we saw when we extracted the... What was the video publishing component? I think was the first one that we did when we extracted that from the JavaScript application. I nearly said from the JavaScript repository and made it an Eventide component. Like everything worked except for where there were some disagreements between my book code and Eventide around metadata. Fine, those are just bugs for a certain definition of bugs. And so with the applications, it's the same thing. The various major branches that you see in there, they don't have code that interacts with one another either. So as we pull one section of it out and put it in the Rails app, there's really what makes migrating a legacy system from a monolith to a service-based architecture is that you don't have services in the first place. The things that you would attempt to extract, it's like... I've heard there's the term spaghetti code, which is somewhat of Italian descent. I love that term. But I've heard it more accurately described as coat hanger code. Imagine like a pile of metal coat hangers. You go to pick one up, you can't do it. You bring the whole stack with it because everything's so interconnected. Whereas cooked spaghetti, I suppose, unless it's like sat in the pan forever and the starches have made everything crust over, you can just pick up a noodle and pull it right out. Anyway, so that's what makes migrating to microservices difficult. But of course, the architecture that's present in the monolith is a reflection of the communication structure of the organization, yada, yada, yada. So if you want to get to that better system architecture, there's some organizational re-architecture that you have to do. Anyway, this is a great deal of words to arrive at the point that the port of the JavaScript code to Rails isn't that interesting from a legacy system refactoring perspective, because we don't need to change the boundaries. They already work. So that being the case, I kind of want to take a note of this because this is worth happening. So as we transition the application layer, we'll have to run both the JS server and the Rails server at the same time. JavaScript gets port 3001, Rails gets 3000, because 3000 is the official port for a development web server, and we're giving that to Rails right now. None of this 8080 stuff or 5555. No, we don't accept that here. So JavaScript gets 3001, Rails gets 3000. That was a silly way to say 3001. All right, so let's look at the code again real quick. We come over here and go to, this is Rails. This is not the book code. Here we go, source app. These are our various application bits. Now, some of this will be a little weird. Like, I wish in my perfect world, when I become creator of the universe and get to redo everything the way that I see fit, everyone will type things correctly into forms because error handling is obnoxious. The aggregator that we just wrote and converted was for a user credentials aggregator, which would be used in our excuse me, authentication bit here. Now the tricky part with that is we use a cookie to do the authentication, and I'm not sure how to share that cookie between the Rails app and JavaScript. Oh boy, let's come into our Express here. So where do we mount our middlewares? I've got to remember how to do all this. Yeah, so I'm using the cookie session middleware. How to share that? Because if we don't have a way to single sign on between the two, then we'll forget single sign on. Who cares? Just in the transition period, we authenticate in both places. What's so bad about that? That's what we'll do. Yeah. So the routing is going to be interesting. So we just need to pick a slice that we're going to move over to the Rails app, which means we can't remove the authentication portion from JavaScript until everything is moved over. So we're just recording the little decisions we're making here. Not going to worry about single sign-on between the two. Like, we could implement a single sign-on thing, but the book didn't have it, and this is about taking the book code and putting it into Ruby with Eventide. So here's the other fun part. These user credentials that we have, they are built in a certain way. So if we open up register users and oh man, like I got too clever for my own good with these promise chains and all the separate files. If I had it to do over again, I don't think I would write the book that way. Oh well, here we are. So let's see. Handle register user. I'm guessing that's the one that we call when we post post to handle register user. Exactly. So that is this one right here. We grab the attributes that we care about out of the request body, and then we call this register user action. Okay, neat. So let's come up to the register user action, which is where we have our chain here. And so we are going to validate what we got, see if that identity is already there. No. Load the identity from the database attached to the context, then validate that we had nothing there. Then we hash the password. So this is the part that I'm curious about. We use bcrypt, and we take the password that was given and a number of salt rounds, and then take the resulting hash and put it in the database. Bcrypt is available in Ruby, right? That's not unique to JavaScript. Oh, and let's address one elephant in the room. If you are familiar with Rails, yes, Devise is like the authentication, or at least it was in 2013, and what could have changed in 9 years. There are existing authentication solutions for Rails. I am not going to use them for our purposes here today. In part because what I know of Devise, I'm not sure how to integrate that with an event source world. And I don't know. It says maybe it's, I don't know. Anything I would say beyond this point is going to be speculation. So I am deliberately choosing to not use Devise. We might comment at it later, but for right now, it's just port what's in the book over to Ruby. So yes, bcrypt exists for Ruby, and I am somewhat curious to see if, given the same inputs, we would arrive at the same hash passwords. Because if we do that, then we can get all the authentication working and everything. So yeah, I don't want to bake this into a model class like this, but really what I just want to see is, could I pull up a JavaScript terminal and a Ruby terminal and then get the same result? So is there anything in here about salt rounds? There is not. That's unfortunate. So what do you have to say on salting? That'll be interesting to figure that out then. Well, let's just do some naive things real fast, because that never hurt anybody. Let's go over to our Rails app here, and we're going to use, at least initially, try to use this gem. So bcrypt is the name of the gem. Let's grab it. If you're not familiar with bcrypt, let me first finish typing before I start speaking. Oh man, I don't know which of these various Rails supplied gems here I need to keep and which I don't. So I'm just going to list the ones that I add up here. And let's see, bcrypt for hashing passwords, gem bcrypt, like so. Great. Now we can bundle install that. And let's do a Rails console. Does that then give me bcrypt? It does. Great. Okay. Neat. So let's see here. How do you actually use it in general? So I could say, what? Just grab this. Looks like a nice convenience method. And I'll use the super secure password I've been using throughout the whole of this series. Okay, neat. So there's a hash down there in the lower left. Now, let's do the same thing with this JavaScript library here. So if we do node to get ourselves into node, and then grab this line right here, and then let's see, so let's copy this stuff right here. I'll grab that much of it right now because that is an async function. What's all of that? If we do then, trying to remember how to type JavaScript. This is kind of strange. Suppose I could have just piped it directly into console log, but invalid REPL keyword. All right, I'm just going to retype this because, oh, right, because there is no context attributes password. So let's do that super secure password. What happens if I don't pass the salt rounds? You did not like that. Uncaught error. Data and salt arguments are required. Okay. Great. So we have to pass it. 10 is always the default they have in the documentation. Those are going to be different, aren't they? Yeah, they're different. Doesn't matter though, because they would have each produced their own salt. All I need is that if one produces the password, that the other can say, yep, that was the password. So I don't need them, like, think about it, son. If I run that again, it's not going to be the same, right? It's different there. The salt is different, thus the hash will be different. Okay, that's fine. How do you then in the Ruby 1 verify? Oh, interesting. Okay, so you would do a password new here. And then pass in the hash that you had. And if you don't do your quotes right, you're going to have a bad time with it. So let's try that a second time. Make a new one of you and grab all that. Like so, and oh shoot, I need to assign that to something. So we'll call it PW. That's a great variable name. So now we want to say, does PW equal that? Okay, a little pause there while it did some thinking. And so now do you equal Bob? You do not. Okay. So I know that this password was hashed with the same one that I typed over in the node code here. So if I grab this, nope, that wouldn't be right. I would need to make a new, sorry, let's set PW equals bcrypt. Is it 2 colons? It is. Password.new and pass in what we got from the JavaScript console. Okay, now do you equal that? Fantastic. Okay, that's good stuff. So I guess the difference is they say that having more salt rounds, it makes it more secure. I'm not a cryptography expert. I don't know if that was readily apparent from everything that just happened in the past 5 minutes, but yeah. So let's go to the node bcrypt, npm bcrypt. And why bcrypt versus other hash things? As I recall, it's like bcrypt doesn't take less time to run if the hash is smaller. And so one attack vector people can use is to time how long it takes to get a response to get an idea for how long a password is. So salt, blah, blah, blah. Salt rounds. Is there a place where it talks about what the impact of that is? Nope. All right. Salt required. That's the salt user, the hash word. What is the actual method call we use here? bcrypt.hash. That's this one. If specified as a number, then a salt will be generated with the specified number of rounds. Okay, so that's just like a helper function that takes both what you want to hash and the salt immediately. Fair. Now, surely, a small chunk of random data called the salt. Great. Supposing I didn't supply an explicit one, isn't that what the dot there means? Like that's the hash versus the salt. And is the cost what they call the number of salt rounds? Okay, increase the amount of work required to hash a password as computers get faster. No. Change the default. Yeah, that's not quite the same. So let's see, bcrypt generate salt. Specify which salt. Hash secret. This looks pretty old. There's a generate salt method. Is it still there? Bcrypt, was it engine? Engine.generate salt. Oh, that dot has nothing to do with it. That's some interesting that 12 matches the default cost factor. I wonder if that is related. Huh. You know what? Forget it. I'm not going to worry about the salt rounds because it's got a salt in it, it looks like. So it's got a salt in it, huh? No, that's terrible. All right, cool. So we can do the user registration. That would allow us to start writing messages right away. I was kind of afraid that like after billing this on Twitter, where like legions of people see the tweet and then come to the stream, that we would just be like doing a bunch of Rails and not doing anything with Eventide. But that's not the case. Let's do the user registration first. This is going to be painful. I just really want to... What is that? Git source, GitHub. Huh. All right, well, I don't really remember how to do everything in Rails, so this is going to be a treat. First step, I would like to verify that the JavaScript thing will run properly right now. I don't remember what we have in our Docker Compose over here. We have the view database and message DB. Great. So if we come over to the book code, what will change from what we have is in our env, the database URL is different. Instead of practical microservices, this is now development. And that means if we run the tests over here in the JavaScript, that will just pollute that development database. And I'm okay with that. Really, it'll just make interesting test data. Interesting is a generous word to use there. But how do we start this again? npm start. Needed. Or need. Neat. All right, so let's have a look. When I reload this, a whole bunch more tables should appear because all of those other migrations are running. And then if we go localhost 3000, and we should still be able to register because none of that would have changed. The only thing we've changed is which project has the Docker Compose running the database there. So login still works. Did I type something wrong? Oh, the user credentials aggregator is not running. So here's where we can come here and start our ported one. Oh, All right, well, that's part of the checks we didn't do earlier today because the database connection information is incorrect. That is fine. If we come down to settings, view data database.json, we need to change this in the example as well. So this would become development because we are transferring ownership of the database over to Rails. So we are adopting the Rails isms for the database name. Hopefully that's about as far as we'll go. There we go. We just ran the aggregator, come back to the database. We then look at the user credentials table. There is our registration that we just did a moment ago. So we can go back to the app and okay, system is running great. That's what we want to see. All right, so now we are going to start stripping away the old application stuff. This is where it's not going to be brilliant. So a few things that like mentally I'm fighting and not saying yet is Rails very much adheres to its thing where you have these model classes, as they're called, and it really likes it when your URL routing matches those model classes. And those model classes are active record objects that have database access and so on and so forth. And our stuff here in the book code doesn't follow those same conventions. So like there's no user set of routes. There's registering a user. That's a process and you kick it off. I don't think it would make sense to use, say, an active record model to back registering a user because it's not going to be reading from the database. It's going to write a command. There is a bit of validation that occurs to make sure that an existing user is not already there, which is, I don't like the way I did this in the book, I'll be honest. I agree with the reasoning that I put in there. I've just learned better ways to deal with it. What are you talking about, Ethan? Well, when we do the user registration, let's open that back up. We query the user credentials table to see if a given identity is already there. And the reasoning in the book was the likelihood of two people submitting for the same email address within like 200 milliseconds of each other seemed pretty low. It is pretty low. And so we're just like, yeah, we can do this query. Like I called it all out what the risks are and various ways we could deal with it. But there are better ways, and we're not going to fix this problem. That's probably a really good thing to do once we've got everything ported. But if we're going to keep it functioning the same way that it already does, we would want a model class backed by that user credentials table. And so that will probably become a user credential model rather than how in the JavaScript code it's called an identity. So I really need to start writing this down because I'm trying to think like how I used to think. So let's see. When registering, rename, load, oh, that's load identity, not naming it, so, or renaming it, it's instead of load identity function to get existing identity will have a user credential model that will be backed by our user credentials table, like so. That's the name of the table. Let's double check. Yep, user credentials. Great. Okay. So what? Right. First things first. Let us deliver on our promise here to the Rails app. It gets port 3000 and JavaScript gets 3001. So there we go. Now we're running on port 3001, which means if I reload, this fails. but if I change that to a 1, it doesn't fail. So now we need to get this screen to appear in the Rails app. I want to believe that that won't be super difficult because it's not that complicated to begin with. So I think common templates, layout. Yeah, so calling this layout, that was totally Rails influence from my previous life as a Rails developer. This uses Pug as the templating language. That is, I think Pug used to be called Jade. Then there was a company that was like, rawr, we have a thing called Jade. You can't call your open source library that. And I don't know, I'm not going to get mad at people for protecting their copyrights. The system incentivizes that. If we don't like it, change the system. People are going to respond to what the system puts in their way. Anyway, so Pug is kind of like Haml in Ruby. I really liked Haml in Ruby. But I really want to minimize the number of things I have to relearn to pull this port off. Welcome. Looks like we've got some new folks in the chat as well, so feel free to say hi if you want. I'm just taking an Express.js application that I wrote years ago and converting it over to Rails. So the UI from it, like when you look at this, you're like, wow, Ethan. Oh, hey, Nathan, how's it going? You probably look at this UI and you think, that is such stunningly good design there, Ethan. And, well, it isn't. There's a cool, I think it's called Bootswatch, for the design impaired like myself. Working and mostly lurking today. That works for me. Thanks for stopping by. Good to see you. So yeah, so Bootswatch is like, it takes Bootstrap and gives you various, I don't know, pre-configured different color schemes and fonts and all of that kind of good stuff. And so Lux is the one I used in the book. I think, yeah, that looks right. And I just did it with the light nav bar. So yeah, as far as replicating the UI goes, it's really just pull in the CSS file and then keep the same structure. So enough yakking, let's actually pull it off. Excuse me. So the challenge we have with that is I don't remember how to do this in Rails. We'll get there. So let's start our Rails server and go to localhost 3000. Hey, there it is. Where do we go next? Is it config? There's no routes file in? No, that's initializers. My bad. Routes. Here we go. So define your application routes per the DSL in etc. And then we have the route path route. I think, what do I think? Sorry, coming back to the JavaScript code here. What is our route path here? Where do we mount our routes? So it is the home application. So if we go to home, and at the very bottom, it creates a router with a home handlers, which is right here. So we load the home page and then do all this. So that home page is actually going to load from this client table, where I think the only piece of data that we have in there was the aggregation of our view count. So that table exists. It's in the JavaScript code right now, so we can do that. Well, let's just not worry about actually supplying that with a value right now. We'll just get the layout back in place. So I'm gonna grab all this Pug here, come back over to Rails, and then it would be an app views layouts. This application one is what I want. Nice. This does not, is this what is shown right here? Oh, that goes to rails.org. Neat. Okay, so what renders what I'm looking at here? Is that just like if you haven't specified a route, then everything's fine? I also feel like that this should be done with tests. Because this route will actually have something. We're going to break slightly from the TDD rigor here that we've been doing, just enough to get the page displayed and we learn how to do this. So I would want, we'll have a home controller with an index action on it. Let's go with that. So now with that in place, if we reload this page, it should give us a complaint that there is no home controller. Great. Okay. That's what we want to see. We're still in the spirit of TDD because we're thinking about what expected result that we have there. And then, wow. Isn't there like, do I have Rails as an executable here? I do. And that is the wrong folder. So let's go to such software, practical microservices, and video tutorials applications. Here we go. So if we say Rails G controller home, so far so good. Here's our home controller, and if we put a def index on there, now it will complain about there not being a view for it. Missing a template for request formats, text HTML. Great. So then we would come, it already made this for us, didn't it? And then you have an ERB file for each controller action, is that right? And if I just say hello, what does that do? Hello, neat. All right. And it looks like it rendered. Indeed, because we have our layout in this column, and so it takes the content of this view and just shoves it in the layout at this place where it says yield. Okay, this is coming back. So what I want to do is replace this layout with all of this pug. Well, not with the pug itself, but you know, the same general idea. So ERB is embedded Ruby, I think it stands for. So it's, in this case, we're writing HTML prose that we can do these cool little %equals tags-ish, block, I don't know, whatever. So that is represented already. Head is represented. We would want this to be video tutorials, like so. And then style sheet link tag application data turbo track reload. I don't know what data turbo track means, but I'm guessing that has something to do with making the development experience smoother. Total guess. I don't know the answer to there, but that probably lives up here in assets style sheets. So I don't actually want this application one, and I don't want to, what do I not want? Oh boy, this is a manifest file. Let me open that with some more space to see it. The asset pipeline came into being just as I stopped working with Rails. So this is somewhat new to me. So what is this saying? Be compiled into a single CSS. Okay, so I would want to leave that in there. Any CSS and SCSS, if configured, file in this within this directory, or any plugins vendor can be referenced here. You're free to add application-wide styles to this file, and they'll appear at the bottom. All right, so what I would want to do is have a reference to what? The bootstrap file, obviously. So let's copy those. So that would be from where we are to code, video tutorials. Don't remember where in there I have that. So probably in source. Do I have a public in here? Is it an app? App public. There we go. Here are the static assets. Admin, bootstrap, and fonts.css. So we want all of you, and let's put you into app assets, not JavaScripts. See, style sheets we call it, right? All right. Now what happens if we reload? Ooh, some things changed here. Oh, wait a second. That's because in here I have all of this. Let me grab that and copy that real quick and reload this page. The color of that changed, so I think we are pulling in these other style sheets. So like if we open this one, couldn't find it. All right. I just open that in a new tab. There we go. Okay, so yeah, bootstrap. Okay, sweet. So we've got the bootstrap code in there. That was easy. So I think we can get rid of both of those. Now then, what do I want to do? Let's just go line by line here and put in here all the things that we'd expect to see. So this is a nav element. I suppose I didn't need to type nav again. And class equals it's been a while since I've written CSS as well. So I think that's the equivalent. And of course we would need to close said nav. And then we can first drop in here an anchor tag with, I want to say class name, but that is that would be incorrect. That's what you do in React. So, and then its href is just to itself. And then video tutorials would be the text there. And then we close that a tag. I haven't written HTML that wasn't, like I said, done React not that long ago, but all right. One neat thing about deleting everything is I don't remember what was parent and what was a sibling. Okay, so this button is a sibling to the anchor tag. I'm going to stop deleting right now. So there's a button there with a class equal to navbar toggler with a type of button with a data toggle of collapse and a data target of navbar supported content, and then ARIA controls. Wait a second. I think I'm not being very bright here. Okay, neat that I just did all of that. But hang on a second here. Surely there's a pug to HTML converter. Indeed. Okay, so let's not like make everybody wish they had never seen a computer in their life. And that did not have the effect I was looking for. Is there an error? What does this do? Toggles the color. What if... Well, let me see if there's a different one. Hug to HTML converter tool. Well, this is unfortunate. There must be something wrong. Maybe it doesn't like these blocks. What happens if we get rid of those? Not that. And there's various other, I think, variables in here. No, there aren't. I don't know why that is failing. Well, we tried. I'm sorry, this part is not very interesting, but it is necessary to get to where we want to be. So, assuming I got that right, this span would then be a child of this button. I need to remember to write my closing tag there. So you are a span with a class of navbar toggler icon. And you don't have anything in you. Can you self-close the span tag? So we're almost to where... How do you do HTML comments again? Is it like that? And then like that to close it? Hey, look at that. So we're making progress. Video tutorials showed up with the proper style and everything. That is great. And of course, this was a sibling to the button, I think. Yes, over here at line, where is my input? Right there. At line 13, we can see that's a sibling to the button. Okay, great. So let's come back and... Is there a better way to do this? And by better, I mean less tedious. Without losing context and stuff. So in Pug, if you just have dot and then a class name, that gets rendered as a div. So this would be collapse, navbar collapse, like so. And you contain all of this stuff. So let's come back here and add that closing tag right now. And I don't think I nailed it. It's over one more, like so. Okay, cool. So then UL with a class equals like so. Great. And then we can come down here. No, not all the way down there. So these two ordered lists are siblings, and then you would be an li with a class equals. Let's make a Vim macro for this probably. And you would get closed like so. Then our A gets a class of navlink with an href of slash, and then home as the text, and close that. Neat. Let me think through this here. So if I started from a tag like this that had, oh, but there's a variable number of them. Whatever. Okay, fine. I was gonna see about making a little Vim macro quick to try to speed this up, but end up spending as much time making the Vim macro as you save. So you have that, you have an href of creators portal. That link won't work because it'll try to go to the same port, and the two apps are running on different ports. Let's take a pause there real quick, and I will comment this out. Is it 2? There we go. Oh, I see that one wasn't really done right either. And if we reload, home and creators portal appeared. That is something. We're getting there. So this would be UL class equals like so. Get rid of that closing comment. UL like that. And now here is our first issue. We have an if statement in here. No, that's not how you comment things out. So I just am going to pick one of those two states and get the page rendering in that state. So let us go with the we're not logged in one, because that would be a more accurate starting point than being logged in. I like so, and you are both nav items, so I could just copy you and paste you and then get rid of you. And then let's see, you're an anchor with a class of navlink and an href of /register. And your content is the word register. Great. And then paste you in there. We'll change you to auth log in and the text log in like so. And let's reload that. And let's compare it. Well, the dev tools are open over here. Slight changes in the spacing of the words. Not entirely sure why that is, but come to accept weird things from the browser. So when we figure out how to tell if the user is logged in, we can add that in there. How much time do we have left? Just like a minute. Let's grab this one. I don't remember what it is a sibling to, so probably to this navbar. Yeah, okay. So not much there. Where that says block content, that's where we'll put the yield. And so I already forgot. That's great. You are a sibling to the nav. Makes sense. There's the end of the nav. That is a lot more than I intended to put there. There we go. Okay. Like so. You are a div with class equal to container. Close the div. And within there, there's another div with a style equal to margin top. And it would seem I was consistent with, was not consistent. And then we drop the yield right in there. And there we go. We got the start of our page there. And these other scripts here, right, they're scripts. We haven't pulled them in. If I remember this correctly, app says JavaScript. What is it? Where does... Huh. I don't remember where in Rails to put JavaScript files that you want to load. Maybe they just go in public. Well, figure it out. Anyway, that's got to be it for today. The plan is we've got to get registration is the first thing. So we want to click here and then have it take us to the register page like it does here still and get this form submission in. And that form submission is going to be our first message write from Rails to MessageDB. And as part of that, we're going to expand the identity component. We have that in here. So if we go to the identity component, we did that wrong. Let me try to blame this all on you and include you in that shame there. Anyway, so our identity component so far, all we have in it is our registered event so that the user credentials aggregator could use that event in its development. So we'll need to add the register event, I think is what it was, that this identity component will use. add that to the client, and then we can pull that into the Rails app and then demonstrate the Rails app writing this event. It'd be interesting to see how that works in a test, because I do want to test for that when we hit the endpoint, we test that we called the client. The client should have a substitute in it. So using the same testing materials we've used when we were actually developing the component, I think we would have access to those in Rails. So it'd be interesting because we've got to deal with configuring that client and stuff. So there's a lot of interesting questions to come that are far more interesting than watching me struggle through remembering how to do Rails and converting Pug over to ERB. Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to take notes on that so I don't forget where we want to be tomorrow. But thanks for coming today. This is the part that I think I've been looking forward to the most, because it's the most new stuff to me. How do we do Rails and Eventide together? And so with that, I'm going to call it for today. Have a wonderful day, and as always, happy coding.